And as Evan mentioned, I'm joined here with two very distinguished panelists. We have a State Representative Jim Keffer, a Republican from Eastland, as you were informed already. He was first elected in 1996 to represent District 30 in the Texas House. And
District 60.
Or District 60, which it says in my notes, and I don't know what my deal is. And he's a member of the Natural Resources and Redistricting Committees, and he serves as the president of EBAA Iron Sales, and of course he's the chairman of the House Energy Resources Committee. And then we have Commissioner Barry Smitherman, no longer chairman, but he was appointed in 2011 to the commission and reelected the next year. And he chaired the commission from early 2012 until August of this year. And before that, the Republican spent more than 6 years on the Public Utility Commission, and half that time as its chair, and he previously worked as a bond attorney and a prosecutor. And so you two, I feel like, you know, as regulators, as a lawmaker, you two sit in kind of the perfect position to take a look at this boom that's been going, going on 5 years, and see what challenges it's brought, what excitement it's brought. And so we'll try to probe on how to keep it going and keep everybody satisfied. So I guess, and as we were chatting before, Commissioner, about obstacles to this boom keeping going, you of course mentioned oil prices. And is this, and of course oil prices have declined, I guess it's over 20% since June when they peaked. And we had ConocoPhillips had, I think they recently announced they have some presence in West Texas, and they're cutting capital expenditures pretty severely for the next year. Are you concerned, these short-term prices, do these have any long-term implications?
Jim, I'm concerned about the volatility. And we've seen a dramatic decrease in a very short period of time caused by events beyond our control. And anyone who is from the Houston area, as I am, and old enough to remember what happened in the mid-'80s when the city of Houston lost 220,000 jobs in a very short period of time, demolished the industry, demolished the housing industry, the real estate industry, the car industry, the steel industry, everything that was benefiting from robust oil and gas development in the late 70s. You have reason to be concerned. So high commodity prices or sustained high commodity prices are something beyond our control. There was a big story on this in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. They took a look at all of the basins in North America and basically concluded that both the Eagle Ford and the Permian would appear to continue to be profitable at $80 and at $70 and maybe we should worry if we got down to $50 or $55. I think it depends on company by company cost structures. If you're a company that has investments in places like the Tuscaloosa and Mississippi Lime and other places where you need $90 oil to be profitable, you may be thinking about what you're going to do going forward. But I think for the time being, the Eagle Ford and the Permian Basin are okay. What I'm also interested in is what happens to the price of natural gas, of dry gas. Because the price has been low for a long period of time. It's less than $4. That contributes to a lot of the dynamics that have been talked about this morning, like flaring of natural gas, for example. My suspicion is gas prices are going to go up because we're going to burn a lot of natural gas to make electricity as a result of some of these EPA regulations. I think we will be exporting natural gas in size, which will probably cause the price to tick up a little bit. We'll be using more natural gas for transportation.
So do you think we'll be having another symposium again about what's going on in the Barnett in the next couple of years?
It's a great thing to stay focused on because in spite of low gas prices, the Barnett still is the biggest gas-producing basin that we have. And it would be very easy, I think, to move rigs out of the oily play into the gas plays of the Barnett and the Haynesville and the gas portions of the Eagle Ford if gas prices went up proportionate to oil price. So there's room for caution on liquids, but I think there's room for optimism on natural gas.
Okay. And Chairman Keffer, how much caution would you advise at a time like this? You've mentioned that because your father used to run the iron foundry.
Father-in-law.
Right? Your father-in-law.
I had to marry into the family.
Yeah, and he always took a skeptical eye as to whether
yeah.
he was going to do business with the oil and gas company.
Oh, because it's ups and downs. You know, I think another thing, and Barry, and I've heard him say this in previous, we are now a global player. You know, we are now a potential exporter of gas and oil, or liquids, or however we want to put that. And the world is not ready for us to be that big of a player yet. I mean, we've got a strong dollar right now, which obviously always hurts commodities. And Saudi Arabia is flooding the market with oil because they don't want to lose market share. I mean, we have to learn how now all the chess pieces fit upon the oil and gas universe, because we are now a big player. And we are able to change cultural and political boundaries. Mm-hmm. So, and we're getting pushback from that. Now, the other side of the coin, as we were saying here, yes, we got to be cautious. I think there is caution. I was out in the Permian Basin a couple of weeks ago at their meeting. We have a lot of very well founded independents out there that are doing a very good job, and they're saying they could go down to 50. Nobody wants to see that. I don't know that they really can, but I think the independents in the Permian Basin and the Eagle Ford, as Barry said, I think are pretty well positioned. The majors always come in too late, and they always pay too much. I mean, so that's really sort of a tough analysis there. But and manufacturing is profiting, is certainly beneficial to manufacturing on low gas, low oil. I'm glad to see $2.65 gas, not $4.50, and we're being cushioned. You know, when the Middle East is as tinderboxes as ever, and our prices heretofore have certainly ratcheted up when there's somebody's coughing over there, but now because of this cushion we have, we haven't been affected in that way. Now we've been affected a lot of other ways, sure, but we certainly have not been affected our fuel prices.
And Jim, let me add one thing to that. I know this discussion is a lot about the Eagle Ford because we're in San Antonio, but if you Google map the Permian Basin, it's 5 hours down the road on I-10. Actually, you can go 80 to 85. Most people go 95 on I-10 on the west side. That is within the economic scope of San Antonio, sure, Bexar County.
Sure.
And the Permian Basin, I don't know if Ben Shepard's still here, it's extraordinary. Mm-hmm. It is a multi-layer cake, if you will, of plays side of Saudi Arabia, the biggest oil field in the world.
12 Eagle Fords would fit in one Permian Basin or something along those lines. Yeah.
So in spite of what happens, and Jim is right, and we can't control global commodity prices, and it would appear as if the Saudis are kind of flexing their muscles a little bit. And I don't know if that's against us or the Russians or who it is intended to hurt, but the Permian, both Texas and New Mexico side, is extraordinary. And that is an area that's going to continue to prosper, I think, for a long time.
And that's not even talking about commercializing the Klein Shale yet, because they're still trying to commercialize the Klein out there. Right. And if if they can figure out that geology, and I suppose that's just going to add to it.
And I suppose right now with the lower prices right now, some of that exploration maybe in the Klein might go down for now. But what I've been told by pretty much everyone I've talked to, and you sort of mentioned from the Wall Street Journal article, is that it's still profitable to produce, obviously, at these prices in the Eagle Ford and in West Texas, depending on where you are, and that, partly because, energy companies have poured all this money into infrastructure. Is that why we're kind of insulated in Texas, why it's a little bit more profitable and we don't have to, pay to take the oil and gas via train to get
well,
to the
I think it's like any cluster industry. In the Permian Basin and now in the Eagle Ford, you have all of the services that you need. You've got the drilling rigs, the frac crews, you've got the water haulers. Everybody's already there. You don't have to reinvent the industry because the service industry is there. Everybody's got an office out there. But I also want to mention that one of the things that's going to continue to propel the Permian is, and this is a docketed item, so I can't get into it too deeply, is we may be thinking about changing some of our rules. For example, if a lot of acreage is now occupied by old vertical wells, how do we make sure that we can drill it out effectively with horizontal wells and stacked horizontals and be able to get 7 or 8 horizontals into the same unit where you can only get 5 before? Those are the kind of things that we're looking at. Most people in the Permian, most operators are in favor of it, a 2 are against it, so it's going to go to a hearing. But that continues to provide opportunity for that basin to prosper.
Yeah, and there's nothing like the oil and gas industry that raises all boats. I mean, the economic power that the oil and gas industry has is amazing as it affects almost every other industry you can think of. I mean, shoot, Ohio's is reopening mothballed, shuttered steel plants for tubular good. I mean, they're going back. I mean, that's just the kind of amazing draw, I think, that the oil and gas industry has on just about every industry you can think of.
And so you seem to be, in agreement that we're going to be dealing with this for a while. The boom, the work that goes into it. Commissioner Smitherman, as you're preparing to leave the commission, do you feel like the agency, the Railroad Commission, which regulates oil and gas, does it have enough resources to kind of grapple with cranking out permits and inspecting pipelines, inspecting wells? How would you assess the condition of the agency there?
Well, last session, the legislature gave us more money and more resources. And Jim, we thank you for that. We've tried to put it to good use. I mean, we're basically an 800-person agency, about half of which are in Austin and the others are in our district offices. And so we need more bodies and we need to pay our people better. As has been discussed, our people get hired away all the time by the private sector, which is probably going to continue to happen. But they also get hired away by other state agencies that pay more than we do, right, which is pretty frustrating. Right. I would think of all places, the Railroad Commission ought to be able to pay its people well. So we got to work on that. We continue to invest in technology. That's important. But I really have to commend our staff. We have gone from permit turnaround times that were approaching 21, 22 days back in the summer. We're back down to 4 or 5 days now. And we're doing that by using some better technology, by hiring more people, by streamlining some of our processes. So we can always use a few more people. We can pay our people better so we can retain them and use technology. And I think we've made a lot of progress on that. One of our big priorities now is pipeline safety and inspection. Paulie McDonald runs that group, and it's a high priority for me as chairman of the NARUC Gas Committee. Our association has made pipeline safety a high priority. And so we're continuing to try to hire up in that division, but it can be challenging because anybody who's probably qualified to do that has a bid away from a private pipeline company, right, paying them twice what we're talking about.
And the legislature gave you money specifically to boost that, right?
Yes.
The safety.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. And Chairman Keffer, do you feel, are you open, am I correct?
And when you say the legislature gave, the oil and gas industry is a self-funding industry, and we are just sort of recirculating that money back to them.
And am I correct, Commissioner Smitherman, the Railroad Commission is asking for a little bit more too in its budget request for this?
I think that's right. I actually abstained from that vote since I'm not going to be here for the next session, but I think I recall that there's a request for more.
And so Chairman, are you open to listening to those pleas? For more
I think one of the major mistakes that were made in the past is that everybody tried to be too Republican and too conservative and too, cut their staff and cut what they were doing, and then were hit full broadside with this opportunity in this great situation that we run into with the oil and gas industry, but we did not have the people because we had kept it so low in the past. So now and the public, let me tell you, the public, the conversations I've had, they demand and they expect the Railroad Commission to, once they figure out what the Railroad Commission does, then they expect the Railroad Commission to be there and overseeing the industry and making sure everybody's colored within the lines, because this phenomena of urban drilling that started with the Barnett and we still have today is something that people want to know that there is somebody looking over the industry's shoulder.
And maybe if we end up changing the name someday, it'll be a little bit easier to get that dialogue.
There's been
started.
attempts.
I tried.
Yeah.
I tried without success.
And sort of speaking of the agency's resources, we talked a little bit in previous panels about the flaring issue and the San Antonio Express News's sort of collection of data of how much gas is being flared, and it sounded like to some extent that am I correct that some of the data cohesively caught the commission off guard, or at least the fact that some of these companies hadn't been applying for permits, that kind of thing? Was that an issue that came about just because of the need for more resources at the agency?
Jim, I was only aware of the stories this morning, actually, and I went back and took a look at it over the lunch break, and there was an interview of me when I was running for Attorney General, and I guess at some point we started talking about flaring, and that got captured and sliced into the article. I think here's the reality. We've got 150,000 wells operating. We're processing 2,000 to 2,200 permits a month for drilling, and then we have completion permitting. And it looks as if a handful of operators were flaring without a permit. So the way that works is you can apply, if you have a permit, you can apply for an administrative extension on an emergency basis to be able to continue to flare while you're completing the well. You can get several of those extensions, and after that, then it has to come to the commissioners for approval. And for the most part, we have done that because the alternative is shutting in the well. So I think with those operators where it was discovered that they didn't have a permit, I think we've taken action against them at the Railroad Commission. We appreciate San Antonio paper bringing that to our attention, and I think we've either corrected it or in the process of correcting it.
That's a bigger priority now to kind of look at that, or is it?
Well, it's always a big priority, but again, it's one of these challenges where the development has happened so fast, particularly in the Eagle Ford. The infrastructure was not there, where the drilling is outpacing the pipeline development. I think it's going to catch up over time. Nobody wants to vent or flare money up in the air, which is what is happening. And I think the companies are doing a better job. It's a high priority for us. We're talking about it at the commission, but I do want to highlight how proactive we've been in other fronts, whether it's on well integrity or water recycling, or as you know, we just passed in the last couple of days a new requirement for disposal well applications that you have to do a seismicity investigation. Right. So we may move slower than some people want us to, but we're making progress in a lot of different areas, and this is probably one that's going to get more focus going forward.
And so we talked about, in terms of keeping the boom going, we've talked about making sure the Railroad Commission has enough resources. We've talked about just the volatility of the market. The Railroad Commission and state lawmakers speak a lot about federal intervention and sort of fears that the EPA or other state agencies will kind of swoop in and decide to regulate aspects of drilling. Are there any specific federal moves? I guess I'll start with you, Chairman Keffer, that you're watching that you think could threaten progress? Any specific proposals? Or
I think the biggest cloud out there is endangered species. I really feel that is such a over. I mean, it's when you start delving into it as we have, there is no light down the tunnel.
So basically leaving areas off limits if certain endangered species are
and how we come about naming and dealing with all that, whether it's the two-headed gnat or the, whatever the case may be, whether you're trying to drill, you're trying to make a dam, with water, a waterway or whatever the case may be, it is something that, and federally, our colleagues have told us that they would like to bring that, you never want to do away with it. You never want to deal with it in a manner that you don't care, because that's not the issue. The issue is we got to coexist, and we got to figure out how to do it in a way that it doesn't stop mankind. And I think that, to me, when you look at it and see how much that deals with every aspect of whether it's oil and gas or whatever, I mean, that is something to me that's very concerning.
Sure. Is there anything, Commissioner, beyond the endangered species that you fear? I know just when the Commission passed its disposal well requirements, you and some of your colleagues mentioned, this is showing that Texas can do it itself. And I think the EPA had actually, its scientists had sort of supported the regulation that were proposed.
As you recall, there was a headline that the EPA Region 6 administrator had commented positively on our proposed.
that was my headline.
Yes. Sure. And everybody was like shocked, EPA and Railroad Commission actually agree on something.
It wasn't just lunch.
Yeah.
But the staffs collaborate and things like that. But I'm wondering, is there anything else?
Well, I worry a lot about this fugitive methane emission issue, because both the EPA and the Department of Interior, as well as the Department of Energy, talk about it. They talk about flaring and what the satellites look like from the sky, and every time I go to a national meeting, I get sort of beat up around the head and shoulders from DOE about this. And so I worry that they might try to overreach, and it's not just about at the wellhead for them. It's all the way through the midstream and through the distribution system. So for example, the Environmental Defense Fund recently put out a study that they did with Google on fugitive methane emissions in the gas distribution utility world. So in an urban setting, how much gas is escaping, and because of those results in I think it was Baltimore, Indianapolis, and Boston, they would like commissions like the Railroad Commission to focus on that, perhaps more so than pipeline safety. So when we are working with a natural gas utility on replacing pipe, we have a risk assessment matrix that looks at safety, how many people live there, what kind of pipe is it, how old is it, and some would suggest that our highest priority should be looking at how much is it emitting methane.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that's an issue that worries me. I also worry about frac fluid issues.
Disclosure or?
No, the Department of Interior is attempting to regulate fracking on federal lands. And let's make no mistake about it, it has not been mentioned today. If you're not horizontal drilling and hydraulically fracturing wells, this whole thing goes away. I mean, that is the transformative technology that has taken us from a country of dependence to a country of surplus. But it is it. We don't frack, we go back to importing 65% of our oil from the Middle East.
And what's so, the technology as it improves, I live around an old field called the Ranger oil field. And World War I is when it was prolific. And geologists have told us for a long time that probably 75% of the commercial is still there underground. And with this new technology, even these old fields that have been very dormant have a chance to come back and be a play for the region around there. So I mean, it's every day is we're marching one step closer. I mean, it's pretty neat.
Sure, and of course you mentioned this idea of we don't frack, we don't produce. I know it's not in Eagle Ford, it's not in West Texas, but obviously a lot of people are watching Denton up in North Texas, and it's deciding in this election whether to ban fracking within city limits. There's been a lot of money has been poured into that proposal, and I think it's probably the most high-profile case of this sort of tension. What seems to me to be growing between surface rights and subsurface rights in Texas, but it's not the only one. We reported a story, I think it's on our site today. It's just about some cotton farmers out in Glasscock County who are sort of objecting to the way that their sort of way of life has changed since operators have come in. And I'm wondering, is there anything that can be done? And I know it's something that I think Speaker Strauss has assigned y'all to take a look at this rights jockeying. Is there anything to be done either from the Railroad Commission or from lawmakers to try to relieve this tension? And am I correct to say that it's growing tension?
Well, certainly the legislature will make it worse. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people would love to do, but in the final analysis, we could really blow up everything. I mean, you know, there's always going to be tension because there's a lot more surface owner than mineral owner. I mean, that's just the way things are, and especially when you're in an urban drilling situation. You know, I've really been fairly proud of how the local, up until Denton, how the local communities and the operators were getting along. I mean, they were coexisting fairly well. Denton has become a special case because of some other factors that sort of historically made it this way, and now we're having to deal with it. It's going to be a close race, you know, I mean, and I don't know, no one knows, there's no, you know, the polls or people I've talked with up there, it's going to be a very close race. And people have to realize that there is tort, there is, you know, certainly years and years and years of cases on subordination of surface to mineral. And that's not going away. I mean, that's there. And I don't think City of Denton wants to be in the limelight of challenging all that forever and ever and ever, because it would be a long drawn out situation. So whatever the outcome of that vote, we're going to have to look at it, win or lose. We're going to have to look at it on how, I think I know how we got there, but how do we keep from this getting to this level in other places?
Yeah, and do you feel, I think if I'm accurately portraying some of your letters about this, Commissioner, you have suggested that, you know, this could, you know, if Denton bans fracking, maybe embolden other cities where there may be fewer mineral owners inside the city to think about this as well, and maybe, you know, lead to a domino effect. Is that something that you see?
Yeah, actually, it was one letter. I think it was about 8 pages long, but it was one where I tried to lay out an epistle.
Yes,
that's right.
epistle.
I tried to lay out my thinking on why this is a bad idea for a variety of reasons, and I do worry a little bit about copycat after that some group, and I don't know the numbers, but I think to some degree there are people from outside of Denton that are trying to influence the outcome in Denton. And whether they take that show to Bryan or Baytown or some other place remains to be seen. I think one of the reasons that we have so much capital wanting to be deployed in Texas is because we have a predictable regulatory environment. We've been at this for over 100 years. Unlike other places around the world or even in America, where you don't really know what the rules of the game are and they continue to evolve on you. I mean, imagine investing a couple of $1 billion and suddenly the rules change. The next time you have an opportunity to make that investment, you may go somewhere else. And I think that's one of the unfortunate things about Denton, is that it could lead to that degree of uncertainty about whether my investment is going to be protected. We have, as Jim said, we have a long legacy of mineral interest rights being predominant over surface. And the way that embodies itself is when you go to buy a piece of property and you try to buy the minerals, either you can't or you can, and it's going to cost you a lot. So if a person bought property and didn't get the minerals, they probably paid less for it. If they got the minerals, they paid more, and now suddenly they may not have an opportunity to be able to take advantage of that.
And I do wonder, though, you know, as we're talking about this boom, as new communities are experiencing oil and gas production, I wonder if there's going to be more and more disputes over this. I mean, there's the tiny town of Nordheim which is in the Eagle Ford, is protesting this giant surface waste disposal site that's proposed right outside of it. And I'm wondering, is this, is our favoritism of mineral rights are long held, it's constitutional balance there. Is it ever going to be put in jeopardy as more people with surface rights sort of experience contact with the industry and when they hadn't in the past, and say that, you know, some folks don't like that?
I think anything can be challenged. I mean, if people think it should, then I guess, but that's going to be a long, drawn out. I mean, everybody has to go in there with their eyes open on that. And you know, and again, up until Denton, and again, if you study Denton and where all this has come about, it's not as. It's one of those like the Gettysburg, you know, Battle of Gettysburg. It was a very small skirmish, and then it turned into what it turned into, and this is sort of what Denton has evolved to. But the coexistence factor of, I mean, the oil and gas industry is, you know, they have matured a lot since the Barnett Shale. I mean, the first steps in the Barnett Shale were just ridiculous. I mean, we could go through a lot of stories one at a time of how they treated people in subdivisions and that kind of thing, and I really feel that a lot of hard learning has been done by the industry because of the obvious. You're not in Kermit anymore. You're not in the middle of a pasture anymore. You've got to deal with people. And not that Kermit's not a good place. Don't get me wrong here. But
there's your headline.
Yeah, but it is different in downtown Fort Worth or Denton or wherever the case may be. So it's a learning curve. I wish it was better. But we've got, again, find a way where we can coexist, where we can parallel, and operators have to be sympathetic to schools and locations, and I think the Railroad Commission has done a very good job of making that part of the thought process. And because, again, we're evolving. I mean, we're not 1955. I mean, we're not all West Texas, and all you got to do is worry about shutting the gate, keeping the goats in. I mean, you've got to grow with where we are, and it's a lot more painful than anybody thought, I'll guarantee you. But I'm hopeful as we get past Denton that we can take a breath and sort of see, okay, what do we do now? With, like I say, win or lose, because if you win, whatever, there's going to be 50% of the people probably just about, they're going to be mad.
Sure.
I mean, however that goes, it's going to be, I think, that close. So we've got to figure out then now how to go forward for our state in light of that.
Commissioner Smitherman, do you see, as you're preparing to leave the Railroad Commission, anything else that the Commission can do to try to relieve any of this as well? I know that there's a proposal on common carrier pipelines, which pipelines are eligible for eminent domain. Anything else that the Commission should take up?
I think you'll continue to see work being done on disposal wells. And when we're fracking to the volumes that we are, you've got flowback water, you've got to do something with it. We're encouraging recycling of that, but nevertheless, with these volumes, we're still going to need new disposal activity. And so we started a rulemaking, which we haven't completed, which would require us to look at a greater distance away from the well before approving it, looking at operating wells close by, the geology requiring more cementing all the way up and down. And my guess is that my successor and the other commissioners will probably take a look at this again. It's kind of hard as you go into session to engage in rulemaking because I think if the legislature does something by statute and we do something by rule and we have to come back later on and change it, or they may want us to go in a different direction. But I think that is an area that we definitely would look at more going forward.
Sure. And one question that I'll put out there before I open it up to questions, so if anyone's thinking about the questions, you can get ready to trickle down to the microphone. You mentioned disposal wells, and one issue that the Commission was dealing with in a couple specific contested case hearings is a lot of these groundwater districts protesting disposal wells and with fears that either through well integrity, some of this fluid might leach into the surrounding water, even in brackish water. There's the hope in Texas to tap as much brackish water in the future as we can. But as we put these hundreds and thousands of disposal wells in the ground, I'm wondering, is there any battle looming over water access and disposal wells that we need to take a look at, or are we okay on that front so
Well,
far?
just quickly to be clear, the battles have not been about fresh water, it's been about brackish water and who has jurisdiction over that.
Right.
And so a couple of groundwater conservation districts routinely intervene in our disposal well cases. And for the most part, our staff takes their comments and works with them. Now, in some cases, they're up in the Panhandle, and this is a disposal well in the Eagleford, and so they're not granted status as a party.
Right.
But generally, we take their comments, and I think our team is sensitive to what they are saying without making them an official party to the proceeding.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Anything you'd want to add, Chairman Keffer? I mean, as we, I guess, as recycling improves, you kind of hope that fewer disposal wells will be needed, but obviously we're still.
And recycling is improving at a very, very fast pace.
Sure.
And so, yes, that will be another point of contention of how to work that. We almost had an agreement last session, but it fell apart at the last, and so I know it'll probably show up again. But how operators can work with the groundwater. I mean, it's everybody has their issues and everybody has their rules and regulations, and we have to be party to that and make sure that, and I guess one thing I want to also point out is the Railroad Commission with our Rule 13 that they did, and which I think
integrity rule.
Integrity,
Right.
I think that is a huge benefit and plus for the state of Texas, because and you saw that article that it was not the fracking so much, it was well integrity that was causing issues around
the Barnett Shale.
and now we have they took upon themselves, it was not a legislative mandate, which I'm glad to say. The industry and the Railroad Commission got together and put together Rule 13. Took about a year and a half.
Took a while
to do, but they did it. And it's brought, I mean, nobody is sitting on their thumbs. Nobody is saying, well, that's the way it is, take it or leave it. We understand the evolution, and we're trying to keep up with it the best, like everybody else is around the world. But I think Texas, and somehow, and this is my little pet peeve of the Railroad Commission, but we've got to get that word out better to the public. And because that's some of the problem we have in Denton, is that there are people that are just don't think anybody's watching the hen house.
Well, maybe if people didn't think my primary job is railroad crossing arms and guards.
You look good in a Sam Brad
Well,
belt.
I try
We'll
to
get you a
keep the
whistle.
trains going.
With that, can we give our panelists a round of applause? And anyone who has questions can step up to the microphone.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Virginia Palacios, and I'm with the Environmental Defense Fund out of Austin. And I just wanted to correct one thing that you said earlier, Mr. Commissioner Smitherman. So we did just do a study on methane emissions from local distribution pipelines in several cities in the U.S. And the leaks that we were looking at were specifically non-hazardous leaks. And so, as you know, leaks are graded. Grade 1 is immediately hazardous leaks. So those are the ones that get repaired right away. And then grade 2 and grade 3 are non-hazardous leaks. And so we're interested in, safety is of the utmost importance, and we don't want to take away from that. But we're interested in perhaps prioritizing those non-hazardous leaks, especially the ones that are emitting more methane into the atmosphere, since methane is far more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I was actually at the unveiling of that study at the NARUC meeting in Dallas, and Mark Brownstein was there and gave us an advanced look at it. And my cautionary note again on this is I think we have to be careful as we are prioritizing the dollars that are going to be spent to replace pipe or to repair pipe, remember these are ratepayer dollars. These are consumers that are paying their local gas distribution utility bill. So we need to be sensitive to that, and we need to be sensitive to what segments of pipe need to be replaced because they are the riskiest for hurting people. And with a limited pot of dollars, I want to be careful that we don't reprioritize in an attempt to mitigate climate change versus safety.
Yeah, be interesting to watch.
And one thing, while you're up there, I want to, again, it's a little old news now, but I think EDF, Sierra Club, when we went into disclosure, I think people of Texas don't know how big a deal that was when we got the industry and the environmental groups to sit down and come up with the first ever
Frac fluid.
for frac fluids in the country. Now I realize it didn't go far enough and they went too far and how all that worked out, but the thing is that we were able to sit down and work that out, and with all the parties that were there, and I think to me that's a great compliment to coexistence and being able to move forward when things are really on a tough subject.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? No? We've answered all of them?
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, they're still
All
asleep
right.
from lunch.
Well, if you can give us another round of applause.
Thank you.